Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and the Forge is an area for me to talk about Magic, Commander, and anything else while we try and navigate through whatever this is. Now, I have been spending a lot of time playing through Baldur's Gate 3. It's just a really good game. I was so wrapped up in that I did not realize that the pre-release for Throne of Eldrain's next set, Wilds of Eldrain, is literally next week. So I'm going to go through and talk about some of the cards. But as always, I am not going to do a fully exhaustive set review. If you want that, there are other places you can go. But moving into it, we're going to start in Wooburg order and then move into the multicolored and the colorless stuff, like usual. First up, we have the Moonshaker Cavalry. It's 5 white for a 6/6 Spirit Knight with flying. When the Moonshaker Cavalry enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X till end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. This is a white Craterhoof Behemoth. So white's getting new toys. I don't really want to spend a ton of time on that. Like saying a white Craterhoof should kind of cover that. Next up in white we have maybe not the most exciting card, but it's Stroke of Midnight. It's 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. This is the next iteration of Generous Gift. And same costs, same type of card, and instead of a 3/3 elephant, they get a 1/1 human. So I feel like that card maybe not necessarily going to replace the Generous Gift, but we'll see play with Generous Gift. Now, the last of the mono-white cards I want to talk about is actually a card cycle that I'm going to talk about in each of the colors, but the first one up is Virtue of Loyalty. It's an enchantment for 3 white, but it has an adventure for 1 and a white that is an instant. That creates a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. And the enchantment is at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, untap those creatures. Of the set, I think this one is maybe not the most powerful, but in the top 2. And as we get to the other colors, we will talk more about that. Now, moving into blue, and as we know, blue is really not my color, but when you have a sorcery called Asinine Antics, you're going to catch my attention. So, it's 2 blue for a sorcery. You may cast it as though it were a card with flash if you pay 2 more. And for each creature your opponents control, you create a cursed role token and attach it to that creature. And the cursed role, since we haven't talked about it yet, is you put this token on it and it becomes a 1/1 creature. Though the real reason I even looked at it was the name. Moving on. Next up, we have Extraordinary Journey. It's XX blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you exile up to X target creatures for each of those cards. Its owner may play it as long as it remains exiled. And whenever 1 or more non-token creatures enter the battlefield, if 1 or more of them entered from exile or was cast from exile, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once per turn. So this one works both ways. You can exile your own stuff that has enter the battlefield abilities, replay them, you get the ETB and the draw trigger. Or you can use this as pseudo removal for your opponent's stuff. You exile the couple creatures they have, and as they respend their resources to replay them, it rewards you with cards that you can draw. It's honestly, I kind of really like the way that is like set up to work both ways. So if you just have a ton of mana, you just go, get rid of everything and I'm going to draw a bunch of cards. And finally, coming up, we have the Virtue in blue, which is Virtue of Knowledge. It's 4 and a blue for an enchantment. And its adventure is Vantress Visions for 1 and a blue. It is an instant. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. The enchantment side of it is if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is the one that I think is probably the most powerful in the set. It's doubling up triggers, and we all know how that snowballs in most cases. So, yeah, we're just going to move on from there. Next up, we're moving into black, and the first thing we have there is Beseech the Mirror. It is 1 black, black, black for a sorcery. It has the bargain mechanic, and that means you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast a spell. So its base text is search your library for a card, exile it face down, and then shuffle. If the spell was bargained, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if that spell's mana value is 4 or less. Put the exiled card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way. So I like the way they're setting up bargains here to be, you do something and you get a reward. So whether that's, you have something you don't need anymore, you got an ETB off it, so you can sacrifice that to get your benefit. I also like the way this one's worded in that you only get the free cast if it's 4 or less. Because then you can't do some stupid stuff with it. There's still a lot of stupid stuff you can do with it. But, yeah. That's kind of all I had to say about that one. Next up in black, we have something trying its best to be Living Death, but not quite getting there. And that's Lich Knight's Conquest. 5 and a black for a sorcery. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens. Return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So first off, it's sorcery speed. It only hits stuff in your graveyard, and you have to have stuff to get stuff. I still think this is going to be a great card in those decks that want to be sacrificing their own things to get stuff back out of their graveyard. We're looking at all of the aristocrat decks that are in black, basically. So, yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to say on that one. And my next one up is just another in a line of cheap gotcha cards, basically. And this one has the best name of them so far, and that's Not Dead After All. It's a single black mana for an instant until end of turn. Target creature you control gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, and then you create a Wicked Roll token attached to it. So that one means it gets +1/+1, and when the aura is put into the graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life. And with the other monocolors, we're going to end this with the Virtue of Persistence. 5 black, black for an enchantment, and its adventure side is Lochthwain Scorn. 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 till end of turn. You gain 2 life. And the enchantment side is, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This is the one that I think is like in that number 3 position, just behind the white one. Mostly because it's 7 mana. But, hey, you do you, boo. If that's what you're looking to do, that card's going to do it real good like. Now, as we move into red, we're going to look at, well, the first legendary creature that I have on my list, and that is Godric Cloaked Reveler. 1 red for a 3/3 human noble with haste, and it has the celebration mechanic. As long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, Godric Cloaked Reveler is a dragon with base power and toughness 4/4, flying, and pay a red. Dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Yeah, I think that's going to be really cool with another deck I have. I don't think I want to build that. I tried mono red dragons in the past, and you just lose so much utility for not having at least a second color. And just to keep moving through red, we're next going to talk about a dragon. It's the Realm Scorcher Hellkite. It's 4 red for a 4/6 dragon. It has Bargain, so again you can sacrifice something. It has Flying and Haste, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was bargained, add 4 mana in any combination of colors, and then it has 1 in a red to deal 1 damage to any target. That's a spicy meatball, right? Like, big old dragon. If you sacrifice a thing, you get extra mana to help play other big old dragons. Or you can just pump it in to do 2 damage to stuff. Right. Now, the last in the red cards we're going to talk about is the Virtue of Courage. 3 red for an enchantment. Its adventure side is Embereth Blaze. For 1 in a red, it's an instant. Deals 2 damage to any target. The enchantment side is whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. And that right there is why it is not in the top 3. If it had the clause that said you may play them until the end of your next turn, easily top 3. And yeah, but I do believe this puts it squarely in the last place behind the green virtue that I will talk about after I get through the other green cards I want to talk about. The first one being Blossoming Tortoise. 2 green for a 3/3 turtle. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 3 cards and then return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Activated abilities of land you control cost 1 less to activate, and land creatures you control get +1/+1. So, little known fact, I have a lands and turns deck that the main win con is animating all of my lands. So whenever I get like one of these spicy little gems that lets me get lands back out of my graveyard, or even better, pumps my land creatures, well, I'm gonna jump all over it, right? Like, we don't get those terribly often, especially if you're not, in a land-based set with something like Zendikar. But, again, getting sidetracked. Moving on to Sentinel of Lost Lore. It's 1 green for a 3/4 elf knight. When it enters the battlefield, you can choose 1 or more. Return a card you own in exile that has an adventure to your hand. Put target card you don't own in exile that has an adventure on the bottom of its owner's library, and exile target player's graveyard. The main thing I'm looking at here, it is a cheap elf, and it can exile a graveyard. Every day, the elf deck moves further and further away from having to play any kind of instants and sorceries. But yeah, so that brings us to the Virtue of Strength, the green in the Virtue cycle. It's 5 green for an enchantment, and its adventure is Garenbig Growth. It is a single green for a sorcery. Return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Not bad. Now the 7 cost enchantment is, if you tap a basic land for mana, It produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. This one is squarely in the 4th spot for me. It only cares about basic lands, but if you play this in a mono green deck, mono green go burr, right? I still don't think it's as good as the black 7-drop one, but I think it's leagues above the red one. Alright, that moves us into our multicolored stuff. Now, I'm not going to do one of each 2 color combinations. It's too many slices. No, I just want to talk about 3. The first one is Yarit of the Charmed Apple, 1 a white and a black for a 2/4 human warlock. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. And at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the number of auras you control. So a while back, I tried to make a white-black cheap auras deck, and it failed miserably. This might give me a chance to retry that, and that's the only reason I'm talking about it here. Next up, we have Hilda of the Icy Crown, 2 a white and a blue, for a 3/4 human warlock. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you may pay 1. When you do, you choose 1. You either create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scry 2 and then draw a card. Am I talking about this because I want to build this? No, I'm talking about this because I'm terrified of this. I know exactly where I'm going to see this, and it scares me. And side note, Nate, if you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the third one is where I'm mostly going to end up, and that is Ash, Party Crasher, a red and a white, for a 2/2 human peasant with haste. It has the Celebration ability. Whenever Ash, Party Crasher attacks, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Ash. I don't think I'm going to be building her as a commander, but I already have like a red-white humans thing that I built with stuff from the Lord of the Rings set. And yeah, that's basically going to bring us into the colorless stuff, and then the cycle of lands I want to quickly touch on. So the first thing in the colorless stuff that I want to look at isn't like the Witch's legendary artifacts. No, I want to look at the Iron Crag. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact that taps for a colorless. It's a mana rock. But whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have the Iron Crag become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains Equip 3, and Equip creature gets +3/+3 and loses all other abilities. I don't know. It seems cool to me. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but loses all other abilities. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. The last colorless card we want to talk about is the last legendary creature we're going to talk about, and that is Sir Ginger, the Mealender, or as I like to call her, Sir Ginger, obnoxiously absent from Throne of Eldrain. So it is a 2 generic mana, 3/1 food knight. Sir Ginger the Mealender has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. Whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1. And you can pay to tap and sacrifice Sir Ginger to gain life equal to its power. So, what I mean by obnoxiously absent from Throne of Eldrain. If you recall the Throne of Eldrain release cinematic or commercial that they made, it featured 2 cookies. We saw one of them get eaten, and that was the gingerbread man. But the gingerbread woman survived, and then did not have a card in Throne of Eldrain. So this has been rectified. Right. And now all I want to touch on with the lands. There is a cycle of lands in the set that all start with Restless. You have Bivouac, Cottage, Fortress, Spire, and Vinestalk. They each enter tapped. They each produce 2 colors of mana. And then they each have an ability to animate them. So, Restless Bivouac is 1 a red and a white. And it becomes a 2/2 red and white Ox creature until end of turn. It's still a land. Other ones, the most expensive one is the green-blue one, which is 3 green-blue. Till end of turn, it becomes a 5/5 green and blue plant creature with trample. Still a land. And then they all have attack triggers. So the Restless Bivouac is whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And the Restless Vinestalk is whenever Restless Vinestalk attacks, up to 1 other target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn. I don't know. I think these are neat. Do I think they're going to be like a big player in Commander? Probably not. I find a lot of people tend to be moving away from tap lands and man lands. But with these ones having the attack triggers, maybe. I have a few decks that might want this. But I have found myself leaning farther away from lands that enter the battlefield tapped without the ability to come into play untapped. So yeah, that's kind of it. This still ends up being around 20 minutes. So I think I'm going to call it good there. I don't need anything else. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.